The first item on our agenda is the approval of the October 2nd, 2017 meeting minutes.
Motion to approve. Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Hurt and second by Commissioner Storm to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion on this? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Motion passes. The next item on our agenda is general public comment. The public is allowed to speak to the commission about any item that's not on our regular agenda tonight. What comments or questions do we have from the public tonight? Carol, please come on down.
Carol Bowen, 403 Dakota Street. Last time I brought up the issue of unsafe corners for pedestrians, but then I got to thinking, when it's done during this public comment session, nothing happens. So how can I put it in a position to be discussed?
That's a great question. I think when we take public comment, we probably can consider how that gets on our agenda at some future time or on the study session agenda. Does anyone else have other thoughts on the matter? Dave, do you have any other thoughts?
We're here upon your direction, so if there's things that you want us to review as far as design guidelines or policies, we're open to suggestions, and we could put it on a future meeting agenda. I know after Carol's presentation last month, we passed on those presentation slides, and I think if there's some specific intersections or concerns that Carol has, she could send us something in writing, or send you guys something, and that you could provide us some direction to respond to any concerns regarding our design practices.
Do you need anything in writing?
No, I think we can do it here. I will say, from the follow-up to the meeting, from your public comments, I had raised the question to staff, like, what's the role of the Transportation Commission around the design of the intersections? And I think that type of topic would be helpful for all of us to understand. When we're hearing comments from the public, is it our role to get into the geometry of an intersection, or is it some other role, and what's the right role for us to have? That was kind of my reaction to your comments.
Well, my concern was specifically about the schools, because a lot of them were put in around schools even this last summer, and I think we need to take a step back and think about what we're doing before we do it. There's a lot of information on the Federal Highway Administration's website on this.
Well, I think from my perspective, we rely on the judgment of staff to present their best take on the geometry of the intersections.
Right.
As a commission, I'm not sure our role. I'm not sure we're qualified to speak to, which particular radius to put in a particular intersection. I think that was the question I presented back to Dave, was what's the appropriate role? And I think if there's a policy that needs to be established that gets to how intersections are designed differently, then that might make sense. But on a project-by-project basis, it didn't seem appropriate to me. So I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on how we would respond to public comments about particular designs.
Speaking from an engineer's perspective, typically you design the street intersection based upon the type of usage you expect. And so if you have trucks turning there, you've got to accommodate the trucks turning there. Otherwise, they'll just run over the sidewalk and the green space. So if you don't accommodate the vehicles that you expect to be there, it's going to tear up the infrastructure that's there. So I don't know that you can set a set policy. I mean, the subdivision design standards have regulations in there that set a minimum standard for curb returns and radiuses, and that's typically what is designed off of.
I think at the very least, having some idea of understanding of what, what staff uses to guide decisions might be useful for us. I don't know that we can presume to know as much as you guys, but I think we could at least be somewhat conversant with the issues you're facing and how, the fact that there are guidelines that you're using, that sort of thing. I know we've talked about it, it was some time ago. Commissioner Evans and I spoke with staff about putting together resources on our website to identify kind of the best, the guidance that is used by staff so that we could familiarize ourselves if we wanted to. But I think without a more formal request around any particular project, if it's just like a policy matter, I'm not sure what else we can do.
I would say it's policy. And basically my concern is the safety of the pedestrian.
So I guess I'm not sure what policy it is that we would be reviewing, if it's the
Well,
subdivision
I
regulations, if that's the
I
policy.
don't know that
or
we
what.
should be getting into discussion now. I fully understand that there are certain engineering standards. However, those are the basis. That's not where you stop, that's where you start. And sometimes you can make a situation worse by not thinking through it.
Charles, I want to jump in here. I think in terms of the engineering aspects of it, some of the time I'm comfortable with, and feel entitled to an opinion. And that's without, the kind of background that the civil engineering folks have. But sometimes I'm not. So I just kind of go for it and however I feel on a certain issue. I think the more we do this, the more comfortable we may be, at least asking intelligent questions about the engineering. I think on the general public side of it, I've had several opportunities in the last several months where I've wanted to engage more with someone that's made comments. And I think the perspective is just how the meeting is structured in terms of time. I think if we really, all the public comment, we could be here a couple hours, discussing very valid, important things. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think Dave's comment that if it's appropriate to put it on a future agenda and maybe give it some limited time might make some sense.
Yes, my thought maybe is we just schedule a study session where staff explains how, curb return radiuses are set, go through some of the program with auto turn and talk about the standards that are necessary so you don't, and can probably show pictures of bad examples where they're too tight and explain, because the knowledge I have, obviously, some of you don't have, but so I just take it for granted that the radiuses are set to accommodate vehicles. And you've probably seen good examples of that and bad examples of that. So maybe a study session where you have some staff explanation of why things are the way they are, and then if further explanations needed after that, you can proceed with that. But
Is the public allowed to speak at a study session?
Yep. Yeah, just like, usually there's a staff presentation and public comment. Well, Carol, I'm not sure that satisfies you. I
I'm not
think
sure
another
either.
concern I have
Shall
is...
I just write an email?
Well, I think another
request-
concern I have is as the public, we're still a new body, so as the public comes to us and tries to establish something to be on the agenda, we need to think about how that process works. We don't want to make this an open agenda every night we meet, but at least having a more formal reaction or response to your public comment seems to be appropriate. I think 19th Street project is another one where we've had several people make comments and we don't have any, we essentially don't take a response, except wait till we have a study session. So maybe one thing we could do is to just follow up with what might appear to be, remarks such as yours that need follow-up. And I know Dave and I did that, but there was really no public accounting of that. So that might be something we need to consider? How does the public know that we did anything more than just sit here and listen? So I'd like some time to think about that, and I guess talk to staff and think about what's maybe an effective or efficient way to do that. Again, we don't want to have the public comment period become a space where the public just sets the agenda and then derails our planned agenda for the night. But I appreciate you bringing that up, asking the question, raising the heat with us a little bit. Is there anything else you'd like to say tonight?
No,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you. For anyone that came in a little late, this is the public comment period where we take comments from the public on anything that's not on our agenda. Is there anyone else that would like to say anything? Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item number 3, 1909 Edgelea Road, or Edgelea Road. I'm not sure how that's pronounced. Edgelea?
Hello, I'm Zach Baker. I'm a project engineer on staff here in the Public Works Department. This request was brought to us, and we discussed this in September, if you'll remember. I don't have a lot to add to what we previously discussed. There's been some emails and some phone calls that have been sent that hopefully you guys all received as we've been getting them. Basically, at that time in September, this body, with the information they were given at that time, voted to deny the request and send it on to the City Commission. The requester was unable to make the City Commission meeting, and basically the city manager wanted us to vet it here and not there. So they sent it back here to us to discuss, and I believe there should be a representative here from the household that can provide more information, because I know you guys had questions for me that I didn't know further than what I presented in the report. So with that, is anyone here from, okay. I guess protocol. Do you have any other questions for me? As I said, I don't have much to add other than what's already in the report and what you saw in September, and then the additional correspondence. And then I also just received a letter, as you can see, that I can scan and will eventually get to you guys. But
Could you clarify for us the what is? I know there was a list of places that already have approved parking slots for
yes. So
disabled parking. So could you explain maybe how that process worked?
Well, I think in years past, similar to this body, except it was the Traffic Safety Commission. Traffic Safety Commission. If a request came forward, they would vote, and then it would be, if the City Commission would approve it, and it would become an ordinance, and it'd be on our schedules. And I think I have that attached of some of the other locations. Most of these are either in front of a school, or there's some assisted living places around town that are on this current list. I don't know of any specific examples from just a general residence, but as far as reserved parking there on local streets, it has been done in the city before. It's just not too many occasions. And I guess to recap, at the residence at 1909, there's a little girl that resides there that has disabilities, and that's why the requester was wanting. And there's only parking on one side of the street. There's a lot of cars that typically park in front of their house. And so to aid them in being able to have a shorter trip from the street to their house with their little girl, and then also with the bus drop off and pickup thing, that's why they were requesting it. And I'll take any other questions.
Is the bus drop off the T, or is it the
Her
school bus?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I have several, if it's my turn.
Sure, go ahead.
And I think most of these, Zach, you can answer, and if not, we can wait until the person that lives there gets to the podium. The other zones that you listed, the 4 or 5 zones, and you say and I did see a lot of them were associated across the street from the school. Was that for someone dropping off a child at the school?
I think that is also associated with bus pickup and drop-off, so if you have bus with kids with disabilities, you know, they generally have a spot for them kind of right up front rather than
Right.
particularly where else.
And the school doesn't provide that anywhere on their curb?
Some of the schools don't have driveways off of,
Okay.
you know, so the street is essentially where the drop-off is.
Okay.
I believe this one on, what was it? Maybe 22nd Terrace. I'm not positive, but I think that was an example of one where
Okay.
they have a street parking that they use.
And that's in a residential area, not associated with the school?
Mhm.
Okay. What's the nature of the disability in that location, do you know?
At 19.9,
The
That-
one you just talked about, the residential?
at the school?
Well, actually, any of them.
Well, so for this, there is no like defined separation from one disability to another, so it's not just for wheelchair per se, you know. There's various types, so whatever's signed, it's just kind of covers it all. I don't know if
Okay.
that clarifies
Okay.
it for you, but,
Um,
and to the point at the 1909, at the time, you know, I didn't know what specifically the disability was, but the representative would be able to answer that later.
The residences that are on this list of previously approved, do they have driveways?
A lot of them do, because it's just a city street, so, oh, you mean where the request is? I believe so.
Well, I'm confused with the Schedule 4. Those are residences or those aren't residences? Or it's been approved before?
These are not residents, these are streets, and it just gives a section on that street of where the parking is disabled parking.
So they're not necessarily comparable to what we're looking like at 1909?
Yeah. Like on the schedule, it won't say such and such address. It'll just give so many feet on, you know, on that particular street. Now, whether that's for a residence or for a school.
Well, I'm just trying to get to the point where we can have a comparable that's similar or not. And, you know, I guess with the information I have here, I'm not able to do that.
Yeah.
If you could help us with that.
Well, we can look up potentially where this,
The Traffic Safety Commission has, I mean, I can think of one that's right up by KU campus where people are just like parking to get on campus, and this guy came in and was like, this is my situation. To my memory, he didn't have a driveway per se, maybe like alley access, but I mean, it was a steep hill, and we granted like, I think it was 2 parking spaces or something to that effect. I mean, but it was adjacent to his property, but it's on a city street.
It's on a city street, and
Right.
you don't think he had a driveway?
I mean, we're talking years ago. This
Okay.
is probably 3 or 4 years ago. I mean,
Okay,
I'm trying to,
Commissioner, can I jump in? I think that was a separate circumstance than the,
like, I don't see it on this list.
yeah, because that was it was a different situation. It was a resident permit parking. It's unique in itself, that situation on Edge Hill Road. This is parking zones for persons with disabilities, which is different. There was one that I recall recently being in the last several years that went through traffic safety. It was on Overland Drive, where they had driveways. It was duplexes and not single-family residential, if I remember correctly. And it
North
may
of
have had
580.
2 addresses. It should be on the list. I don't have the list with me, but
It's on there.
it's on here. I'll pull that one up
that
real
was
quick.
one where it's a residential area, there's driveways.
I mean, it's not setting it aside for one particular, anybody with a placard could use it, but,
That's
I
correct.
mean,
As opposed to the Edge Hill Road, that was specific to an individual.
Correct.
okay.
And we haven't kept track, to my knowledge, of the past history of these that are on the list and the reason and the disability.
Okay,
And if the resident still lives there even. So
Right.
some of them have been on the list for years, you know, people move and they may not be needed.
Right.
So
Steve, I think if your question is this, would this set a precedent? I would say, my experience on the traffic commission, there were several in front of houses
Okay,
for this exact
that's
reason.
good.
I pulled
That's
up
good.
the Overland Drive example we were just talking about, so you can see, this is duplexes, they have driveways, but
Mhm.
also in front of the street that there is, some set-aside parking for people with or disability parking.
Okay,
And then, as a different example, at Creever Terrace, this is at south of 21st Street, near just west of Louisiana. This is in front of an Lawrence Adult Learning Center. So on one street, you have the Lawrence Adult Learning Center. On the other side of the street, you have residences. But
right, I did see
on
that
the
one,
east,
too.
on the south side of the street, there is
Okay.
disability parking.
Okay, couple more.
Okay.
How would the 2 disabled parking spaces at 1909 affect how the bus drops off? If they were there, would that make the bus drop off any different than it is now?
So to that, I would say I don't know how that would help unless the people just didn't park their vehicle in front of the handicap spot. So as far as that goes, I don't know that particular angle, I don't know that would assist it. You know, because
Okay.
if there's a car, whether it's their car or someone else's car parked there, you know, they're still having to go out in the street.
Okay.
So I don't know if the avenue is, okay, well, if we have that, not many people have those permits,
Right.
then they would be able to park up the street and there would be an open spot.
Okay.
If that's the line of thinking, I don't know, but you'd have to
That
ask them.
answers my question.
Okay.
Lastly, just the enforcement of this, and I think we talked about this in September. Are these just placards in the windshield that people would have, and anybody could park there that had one of these?
Yes, it would be anyone with a tag. Sometimes they're just on license tags, sometimes they're on little hang tags. Anybody
So-
with one of those can
So
park
it
in
would be
this spot.
complaint-driven if there was somebody parked there that wasn't supposed to be?
Yes, then a resident would have to
A resident would call the police,
department.
and would they get a ticket? Would they get towed? Would they be given 48 hours to move? know.
I don't know. They'd get a ticket at a minimum. I don't know
Okay.
the police department's policy, if they would tow them or not right away, but they'd at least issue a ticket. They should.
Thanks, Zach.
No problem.
I guess I have a question. How much on-street parking is available right now compared to the number of residences?
So I'll pull up the map to where they're at.
I mean, as it is, are there about 2 spaces available for every residence there, 1 space available for every residence by the time you're on one side of the street?
Okay, so I'm kind of zoomed in on this is the residence right here.
Mhm.
And so this is the street, and parking's only allowed on the west side of the street. So everyone has driveways, but, you know, someone has a party or, you know, you have guests over, then that's usually in the streets where people park, and it's all on the west side of the street, so parking is, at a minimum.
And there's no
I've-
parking on 19th Street.
And there's no parking on 19th Street. 19th Street has bike lanes, so there's probably people on 19th Street that try to park around there at the corner as well, so. And then I know, I've been told that during the Douglas County Fair that street's full. There's times a year when it's at a premium to have a spot, so.
Zach, could you explain to me again, you kind of mentioned it, but I'm a little fuzzy on how this got back to us. Like, it went to city commission and was on an agenda and then got pulled?
It was pulled from a city commission agenda. The requester was not gonna be able to make that meeting.
So it was on the regular agenda?
It's on consent agenda, but they were wanting to show up to pull it from that so that they could have their say, which they weren't able to attend this meeting when we had our meeting. So they were gonna go to that meeting. The city manager did not want that to be vetted at that meeting with all of their items. They wanted that to be vetted back here. So basically, the requester was told to make an appearance here today so that they would be able to at least provide more input than what I gave you the first time.
Any other questions? All right, thanks, Zach.
Okay.
All right, we'll open this up for public comment. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak on this item? Just please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Lana Scott. I'm a property owner at 1927 Edgelea, just up the street. First off, I want to say these are my neighbors, and I want to be respectful of their needs and accommodating. But I also want to be respectful to the rest of the neighbors. We do have very limited parking on our street, and there are times when it is hard to find off-street parking. So I think there are some other solutions before we designate or limit parking, off-street parking. I think there are some solutions that could be sought by the requester. First of all, we all have private driveways, private consistent off-street parking where 2 vehicles can fit, back to back. Recently, the requester has started using their driveway for parking their vehicle. Right now, sometimes they will park 1 vehicle in their driveway. I think that with some simple rearranging of some furniture and items in their driveway, they could easily fit 2 vehicles in their driveway. So that would be, for me, that seems like a really easy solution, number 1. Number 2, the requester has a vehicle that sits parked on the street for extended periods of time. I believe it has expired tags, and it just sits in front of the neighbor's house, again, for extended periods of time. If they could move that into their driveway, that would allow more parking on the street. I'm really glad they're here, and I hope to hear, more about their situation, because I've tried to wrap my head around what the need is, because to me, it seems like you've got your 2 private parking spots. I would think they would be the closest, easiest way for you to get to and from, your vehicle at least. And as far as the bus goes, I know there is at least 1 other vehicle, if not 2, on our street that has disabled, parking placard. So they may park there. I don't understand how that parking spot is going to help with the bus pickup. So I'm curious how that would impact. I think there's a spot where they stand most mornings to wait for the bus, and I just really try to wrap my head around what the need is, because from my perspective, there's better solutions than further limiting the parkings on our street. So I look forward to hearing more about the issue, but I'm here to say that I don't think it's needed, and I don't understand the request.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Please come on forward and introduce yourself.
I've never done this before.
Just say your name,
I'm
your address.
I'm the person requesting this.
Okay, what's your name, ma'am?
Charlia Rockhold.
Thank you.
I'm requesting this because my daughter is disabled. We do have limited parking. My driveway is only big enough for 1 vehicle, which my husband has to park his work truck in, which has been vandalized multiple times on our street, being parked down the way because we didn't have a place to park. The reason I'm requesting 2, not only for parking spot because my husband parks in our driveway, is that I parked my car on the street. There is also another disabled lady directly across the street that has a temporary handicap parking placard that actually parks in front of my mailbox as well, and in front of my house to where I can't park. But to be considerate for them as well, because when they park so far in front of the mailbox, they will not deliver our mail. I've been weeks without it, but when they park, and with the handicap parking, it's sort of set back a little bit to where they won't block the mailbox. My daughter can get picked up from the bus because there's times that we have to move further away, or when we come home from, like tonight, my daughter has dance for her disabilities to help with physical therapy. And if we come home and somebody's parked there, we have to park clear down the block and I have to carry her. Because she can walk, but she has disabilities on walking so far. She has AFOs for her feet, cleft lip, cleft palate. She has PDA. She's had holes in her heart. The vessel in her heart's didn't close. She has multiple physical, mental, and developmental delays. She's right now less than a kindergartner in school. She's still in pull-up and diapers. So that's why I was requesting the handicap parking. She does have a permanent, and I do have the card, a permanent disability handicap placard for life, and she does receive SSI. That's why I was sort of requesting, because it does make it hard, especially for me or my daughter, my 19-year-old, when she does, help assist with her sister on carrying a 6-year-old halfway down the block, plus 2 other children, which is 3 years old and a 2-month-old, recently down the street. It does make it difficult, especially in the wintertime. It just makes it hard. And I know parking on one side of the street. And we do have a lot of people parking from 19th Street on our street. I try to be considerate, that, but like I said, 2 parking spots, because I do know the lady across the street just recently received a temporary handicap parking spot as well. Placard for her window. So.
Does anyone have any questions?
So the request is for 2 because of the lady.
Well,
across the
two because, I have 2 parking spots, but also I just, one of the ladies also across the street, I'm not just in it for my,
Sure.
There is a elderly lady across the street that she has a red handicap temporary plate across, and she's one of the ones that parks in my spot as well, right in front of my mailbox. So, she does have a handicap placard as well. So I do know there are elderly, because the elderly gentleman, Galen across the street, he has a big driveway. But most of these driveways can only fit 1 and 2 cars if they're small, because I have been notified from the city that you have to be like 10 feet from the curb because it's the right of way and you cannot park there. I've literally got the letter stating that you have to be so many feet from the curb with having 2 cars parked in the driveway. And so some of these driveways, you can't park, 2 cars in the driveway to be within that 10 feet of right of way from the curb. That they say that there's the right of way.
May I ask a question about the buses?
Sure.
And how the disabled parking spaces would affect that and enhance your ability
Okay.
to get out there?
Where the handicap parking spot is, or at least the one is from the edge of my driveway, just the first one was one parking spot, which is in front of my mailbox, just to the left of my driveway. And that is because of setting like trash cans out, it's hard. And when they shovel, snow, it's difficult because on our street, it's mostly the snow is shoveled to the side that all the cars are parked on. So it makes it sort of difficult. My driveway's here, my daughter's bus stop is literally right at the side of the driveway, right in front of the mailbox. That is where the bus stops. And there's been times she's had to stop clear back, the bus has to stop further away. And I've had to walk her back because she has 2 other siblings that I also have to pick up after school. One at Central and one at the high school. And plus, she also has a 3-year-old nephew that I also have to transport. So it makes it difficult when I'm trying to do multiples and trying to deal with a disabled daughter. I'm trying to get all these in the vehicle at the same time. And as far as the vehicle, and we have 2 vehicles. My husband has a work truck. And it has to be parked in the driveway because it's been broken into multiple times, being parked down the street. Even with it being locked, they've took stuff out of the back of the, excuse me. So we park it in the driveway. We have another vehicle, but it just depends on how many of our family members we are transporting. If we're only transporting a couple, we're not gonna take the bigger vehicle. You know, or depends on how many, you know, where we're going. One has better mileage because we visit my mother-in-law in McPherson, Kansas. So it just depends on where we're driving and how many of our family members we're taking. Which vehicle we're taking, because we have an Expedition and a minivan. And then that's why one doesn't move all the time, and depending on who's driving it. And if we have to go anywhere. There's multiple cars on our street that don't move. They're parked, come home on Friday and don't leave until Monday morning at 7 a.m. because they are business or personal vehicles, and those people don't work on the weekends. My neighbors don't leave on the weekends and don't move their vehicles. So, I mean, it's just one of those things that, you know, people have lives and don't necessarily, you know, they have multiple vehicles and don't drive them 24/7.
I don't believe there are sidewalks.
No.
Dave, do you know the issue about blocking or being in the easement as far as parking? Is that?
That's the first I've heard of that. I'm not aware of any code requirements. As long as you're not blocking the sidewalk, that's
Yeah,
what I'm
that's what I
familiar
thought.
with. We get a lot of those
So
complaints
you can
about parked
literally go up to
vehicles.
the curb.
I wish I would have brought the letter. I did receive a letter in the mail from a vehicle
And you can't block somebody's.
parking at the end of my driveway at the easement. I wish I would have brought the letter.
Who is the letter from?
I don't remember it. I have to ask my husband. I'm bad with names. I'm sorry.
I'm just looking on Google Earth here. Is that trailer still there?
There hasn't been a trailer there for a while. And that was only there, we have a trailer for a country stampede that my husband's brother bought, and we were making sure we loaded it up and fixed the top so it wouldn't leak and stuff. It hasn't been there for a while.
Where was the work truck parked when that was there?
It was parked out in front of our house before we had our other vehicle.
Any other questions?
So I guess the only question I would have is if it's a general handicap spot and somebody else parks there, that doesn't really solve the problem. Because if it's a handicap spot, then anybody that's got a handicap tag.
I
can
understand that. I
park.
know me and myself and the neighbor across the street has a handicap as well, so that, I mean, that's why I said too. But I really haven't seen anybody that has parked on our street that has had any type of handicap tags or placards, or it's all been, you know, young, I mean, not to say younger, you know, because me, myself, am disabled as well, but that there's been no other handicap parking, you know, stickers or placards that has parked on our street outside of ours.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? Okay. And we'll have commission discussion on the item.
Okay, so I have a question, David, or for one. So, I haven't looked up, but I'm assuming there's specific regulations, requirements for handicap parking areas as far as the purpose where they are. Usually, you know, if it's a commercial or a retail thing, it's proximity to a wheelchair accessible ramp. It's not necessarily a closeness issue, it's an accessibility issue. So when we talk about something like this, is there any regulation or anything there that we have to keep in mind, or does it even qualify?
There's not for on-street disabled parking. You know, when we're reviewing or interior parking lots, there's some guidelines to follow as far as providing access ramps to the sidewalk and the proximity of the spaces, but not for on-street public spaces.
Zach, you have recommended approval, correct?
We recommended approval first.
Well, there's two things that I think about this. You know, the issue with parking in the driveway. It looks to me, I don't have a tape measure here, but Mark's pulled up the trailer. It appears as though there's room for 2 cars to park there. And I know a big expedition, a big truck, you know, and a van may be cramped. So I can't be real positive about that, but it does look like the depth of that driveway is probably similar to what everybody else in the neighborhood has. The other thing is I just don't see the correlation between the bus and the disabled parking. The bus is going to, whether there's snow or whatever limitations there are where the bus parks, is going to be there, I think, whether the disabled parking is there or not.
Well, I can speak to that. I mean, typically the buses will, wherever they are on stops, they will get as close to a curb as they can.
Right.
You know, with special cases like in this case, when we're picking up students with disabilities, it is a it's more of a curb to curb or closer to the house, but we do have challenges all over the city with those kinds of things. But yeah, but you know, as far as a bus has the right to stop in the middle of the street, put out the stop arm, and you know, the laws say everybody's supposed to stop and wait for that. I mean, yeah, it might be an extra 10 feet, which I'm not saying it's not problematic, but yeah, you're right. We have those challenges in a lot of different places. Where we can get to the curb, we will, obviously, but there's times when we can't.
Sure.
Having a handicap parking spot just means a car will be parked there.
Right.
There will be a car.
I mean, I wonder, hearing the concern about mailbox being covered and no place to put curbside trash cans, I can understand that especially. You know, I wonder, I don't know if there's an ordinance saying you can't park within so many feet of the edge of a driveway. I don't think there is, but I mean, I could see partitioning off a few feet there to prevent that from happening. But still, that still is going to come down to you know, how is it going to be managed? It's going to be managed by complaint or by police. It's just happening to see it.
Dave, if there were disabled parking on this street, would it be on both sides of the driveway? Or would it be on one side of the driveway? Could you tell us more about where exactly it would be? Or is that?
We had proposed, so the red rectangle is the property line or the lot. So what we'd proposed was just putting it to where it only covered the road frontage in front of that property line, which is about 2 spots.
Does that then provide space to leave the mailbox
I believe so. If you can see under, it's kind of tough to see under that hash, but there's pretty much 2 cars that are take up that spot, and then you can see there's a little bit open here between where that mailbox and the driveway would be.
I guess I'm trying to clarify is, does the disabled parking designation provide some assurance that the place in front of the mailbox won't be parked in front of, even with a permit? Like, is that a violation of any,
So
Well-
I guess what I hear you saying is, so if we had just signed where I have my hand here, if that's where the one end limit of a parking thing and another one's here, someone might still try to squeeze their car in there.
or
right?
could someone with a permit park in front of the mailbox?
Yeah, wherever the sign is, wherever we have the sign placed, someone would be able to do that.
So if the sign is placed a few feet from the driveway, essentially kind of before the mailbox, would that essentially take that out of play?
Let me do this.
It looks like it's not wide enough or long enough.
So, look, this is Google Earth view here.
Mhm.
So if we had a sign, like right in here, and then another sign back here, there wouldn't be enough room for someone to park in front of it, so that would be, 10 feet or so in front of the driveway, in front of the mailbox. And so a car could, basically where this van is, and then one more behind it.
Are we asking about the mailbox just for the mail delivery issue, or was this?
Well,
We're gonna say everybody's mailbox?
it seems to me that you're going to still have the same problem of the bus not having an easy way to get to the house if someone's parked right up against the driveway. So I'm just trying to get clear on, I kind of inferred from a comment from the speaker that from Charlie, is it Charlie?
They call me Charlie.
All right. That somehow your understanding was that designating that as disabled parking would in fact protect that space in front of the mailbox, and I just try to get clear on that.
From what I gathered from Zach, and I've actually talked to my mailman and the postmaster, because if there's not so many feet to where they can't pull in, I mean, the cars that park in front of my house now park, like my mailbox is here as a diagram, and the cars are parked literally right here. And they're not allowed to back up or get out of their vehicles to deliver mail. So I've not got mail for a week because somebody else, whether it be 19th Street or whatever, not saying, like I said, I haven't seen any other handicapped people, but they park this far, and because of that, I don't get my mail.
But are the other neighbors having the same problem?
My next door neighbor is, and when I've talked to the postmaster at the post office, they said they are not allowed to back up, get out of the vehicle, or anything that is against their rules and against regulations for safety concerns, so they will not deliver your mail. Is what the postmaster told me, and actually I had the discussion with a police officer one day, and he said his mother had the same issue across town somewhere to where she didn't get her mail for 2 weeks. So, it's not,
So I'm just trying to clarify, Zach, is there anything about the disabled parking that kind of compels you then to put that on one side or the other of the mailbox? Or is it just literally your placement?
No, it
determines that?
was just thought that because of the requester it was for this household, that the 2 slots in front of them on the, where is it at? The 2 spots in front of their house made sense, and then rather than one on each side of the driveway where part of that would possibly be encroaching on the neighbors, in front of the neighbor's property lot line.
I have a little concern if another neighborhood limited parking that we're taking up and saying, oh, that the frontage in front of the house is assigned at this house, whereas the people on the other side of the street they don't have any parking to use. And so I think I could support one of those, but saying two would be pushing it, in my opinion anyway.
Did we receive any comments from the person across the street?
Yes, we had,
Was that one of those?
that was one of the correspondence that we added on Friday, I believe. Is it Galen White? Trying to see here.
David, are you saying that if that person made the request as well, then you would consider both spots, or?
No, I'm saying that I think one spot is appropriate in this situation because it's almost kind of a reserved parking space for them only versus two
His letter
reserved.
just said he had no objection to the disabled parking request. That's all I said.
I'm just concerned with the limited amount of parking there, that you take two spots and you assign it to essentially this residence. It makes the parking even tighter in the neighborhood.
Well, I think where we landed the last time, I think we all had pretty strong feelings that one would be reasonable. And I think that's where I'm at the moment. Now that I understand more about, the particulars about the child made a difference to me. I do think that that's what's driving my decision, to go with one. But I think all things considered, there's a lot of things we can't fix by putting a disabled parking there. And to think we're going to fix a mail situation, a mailing situation, a bus situation, and all those things are pretty unreasonable. My biggest concern is how it's going to be enforced and how you're going to keep people from parking there. I guess to be determined,
Any other discussion on the matter? All right. Someone like to make a motion on the item?
Well, I'll move that we recommend that one disabled parking stall be provided in front of 1909 Edgelea.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve one disabled parking stall on the street at 1909 Edgelea Road, made by Commissioner Evans, seconded by Commissioner Hamby. Is there any discussion about the motion? Seeing there's no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Are there any abstentions? All right, the motion passes. Thank you for coming tonight. The next item on our agenda is 28th and Kensington request for traffic calming.
Okay, this one is a neighbor on this street on the corner of 28th and Kensington requested traffic calming in front of the school there between 27th and 28th, and also requested, there's an existing yield sign on 28th Street at Kensington. They were requesting that be changed to a stop sign. So we took traffic data in September of this year after school had started. I guess first I'll give some background on the street. It's classified as a collector. 27th Street and 28th Street are collectors, and the little jog around the school on Kensington connects that. So it is a collector. Speed limit is 30 miles an hour. This is a safe route to school. It's not a bus transit route. This is on the Douglas County Bikeway Plan. There's an existing shared use path on the west side of Kensington. There's sidewalk along both sides. The sidewalk on the east side is just your standard 4 or 5 foot wide sidewalk. And the street cross-section is just 31 feet, asphalt pavement, curb and gutter for drainage. So we took traffic counts, and it was well below the threshold for the traffic volume requirement for our calming policy. So it didn't meet criteria A, but it did have average speeds. Actually, I guess I need to pull up the drawing here. Here's the traffic data and shows the speeds. So in this areas where we're talking south of Kensington, the average 85th percentile speed was not sufficient to consider for traffic calming. Same thing on 28th Street, and more so those data was just taken there just to kind of get an idea of what was going around the neighborhood, but the specific request was in this section, and in that section the average speeds were greater than 35 miles an hour. So it is eligible by our policy. There's cut-through traffic is greater than 50% as well. There's also more than 50% of the frontage has driveways, so there's several of the criteria that it meets. Let's see here, there was, what else? So that's the data pertaining to the traffic calming aspect of it. Different set of criteria from the MUTCD for stop signs. So we looked at the stops or the yield sign at the intersection at 28th and Kensington. The vehicular traffic volume was well below what would be considered for their criteria. There is no restricted view. You can see well in both directions. And there was no crash data at that intersection to show that there's an issue. And also we had discussed, I met with Ron and the principal of the elementary school because this request was along the frontage of a school district property. The principal was in favor of traffic calming on Kensington in front of the school. They did not feel it was necessary for the yield sign to become a stop sign. They have a crossing guard at that intersection and spoke with her, and she thinks it functions fine as is. So with that, staff recommends approval for the request for traffic calming on Kensington between 27th and 28th Street, and it recommends denial of the installation of a stop sign.
All right.
I'll entertain any questions.
Any questions? All right, thank you. What questions do we have from the public on this item? All right, seeing none. Commission discussion?
I can just add briefly that kind of where the buses do not go on that street. The drop-off is actually off of 27th Street in that little loop there, but there is where you look up to the north off of 27th. It's a one-way. That's where the drop-off is. So the cars who are dropping off kids enter from the north off of 27th. They drive to the front of the school, drop off, and then they come back out going east, and they turn onto Kensington there on that furthest. So that does kind of add a little bit to the, See, that lot right there at the top is parking only, so there's no through traffic, but you can see there that how it drives through the front of the school, and then it comes back out through that bottom lot. And then they have a left or a right turn into traffic. And one of the proposed humps is right in there between those two, But, David Williams was very in favor. They talk a lot about, especially with the morning sun, that curve there at 28th and Kensington.
Yeah, he did mention that, so
There's a lot of speed.
I forget which time of year, maybe it's now, but for eastbound traffic on 27th in the morning when people are taking their kids to school, you're looking right into the sun through there, so coming around the corner.
And people tend to cut that corner as they head west.
All right, any other comments or discussion on the item? do we need to approve these, can we do them as one, or do we need to separately vote on each of these?
Move to approve the staff recommendations.
That work?
That works
All right. All right, the motion was made by Commissioner Ziegelmeier, seconded by, did I say that correctly? I think. Seconded by Hamby to approve the staff recommendation. Any additional discussion on the motion?
Just real quick, there's a little typo there. You've got rock ledge underneath the picture. I assume you were doing a little copy paste on this.
Oh, yeah, I'll edit that.
Okay.
All right, no discussion on the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Motion passes. Takes us to item number 5, traffic calming request on Crossgate Drive at Alvermar.
Okay, on this one, in 2011, the Transportation Commission received a request for traffic calming on Crossgate Drive north of Clinton Parkway. At that time, data was collected and the Traffic Safety Commission approved 880 to recommend traffic calming in this area. Later, the City Commission also approved that unanimously. Since then, there's been development in the Alvamar golf course to the north. As part of that development, well, let me step back. So once the City Commission approved that, that went on our list of traffic calming projects that we've been adding to. That project, once this development was started to the north, we saw an opportunity where we can have the developer add traffic calming as part of their development. And so this is a scenario where we can have them pay for it and it gets something crossed off the list. So we sent out letters to residents with proposal for locations for speed humps. Originally, there were 5 in this location. We received feedback, and based on the feedback, we reduced that down to 3 at the 3 locations you see. We gained greater than 70% approval from residents for these 3 locations. So at this point, it's staff recommendation to approve the installation of 3 speed humps as shown on Crossgate between Clinton Parkway and Albemarle.
Thanks. Are there any questions about this one?
At the cost of the developer?
Yes.
100%?
Yes.
Yeah, I would add into that. This was part of their approved development plan for the Alvamar Golf Course project. So there was a lot of discussions going through the planning process on traffic calming on the street. And so it was approved in the plan. We didn't have the specific locations identified because we wanted to go through our typical process to see spacing and location. So that's what we're here for today. It's already part of the plans. It would be constructed after they complete the north side of their project, which ties into Bob Billings, Old Crossgate, which is turning into what's now Birdie Way. So once the work up there is complete, this would happen after that is all open. So it would occur in this before the fall of next year would be the deadline. So it'd be sometime in 2018 it would be installed.
So you'll be able to go from 23rd or Clinton Parkway to Bob Billings all the way through on this road when it's completed?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you will. Yep.
The north part, there's a roundabout up there and it's going to be called Birdie Way, but essentially you can get all the way through,
Yeah.
yes.
But it would be a way to cut through.
Mhm.
Yep.
The 3 locations that you marked, Zach, it looks like are they raised crosswalks? Are they speed humps, cushions? Do we know yet?
It'd be speed humps through there. This top one is just, there's a little private drive, and this is actually pretty steep right through this area if you've ever driven through there. So this would be north of that private drive. There's also another driveway up here to the north, so it would probably be somewhere between there to where people turning from into each off-street driveway, that they'd have plenty of
Okay.
clearance from the hump. Down here, this one actually will probably be just a fuzz further to the south from what I have illustrated. Just, I had a comment from one of the residents living here. She thought that was kind of close to the entrance, and I agreed. This was kind of a crude drawing we drew up on Google Map, but it'll be somewhere in this area.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Zach.
Hmm.
Any discussion on the item?
Motion to approve.
All right, motion made by Commissioner Herbert. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for catching me on that. Are there any comments from the public or questions from the public on this item? Okay. Now, commission discussion. Is there any discussion? Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, motion is to approve the staff recommendation to have traffic calming on Crossgate Drive at Albemarle Construction Project, made by Commissioner Hurt, seconded by Commissioner Storm. Is there any discussion of the motion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Motion passes. The next item on our agenda is item number 6, the 23rd Street Center Turn Lane. We're keeping you busy tonight, Zach.
I loaded mine up the front, so I'll be done. Here we go. Okay, basically this is a project that spurred from, after the South Lawrence Traffic Way was finished last year, the state, or 23rd Street becomes part of the city, city-controlled street network and off the state system. As part of that, the state had a turnback agreement where they would give us money for needs on 23rd Street in various locations. There's money set aside for other projects on 23rd Street. This particular project is the one I'm going to be talking about today. This is between Louisiana Street and Massachusetts Street. And basically, KDOT would give us up to $500,000 from reimbursement for the construction of a center turn lane and highway safety monies. And we kind of have a basic layout of what could potentially be. This isn't set in stone or anything. This is just kind of a general idea of what would be there. But currently here in front of Checkers, you'll know there's that little kind of a tight little taper there that's always kind of awkward to drive through. So that would be done away with. There'd be sidewalk included on the north side of the street. And then entertain the possibility of adding potential diverters or other traffic calming devices on side streets as seen fit. I'm assuming with the project scope, the whatever consulting firm would look into, traffic counts and speed data on side neighboring streets and then also today to see if there's any public comment for things of that nature. But generally, this is just an approval to accept the KDOT funds to pursue this project. Also, while the street work's being done, City Utilities Department's going to take advantage of, while the road's under construction, to upgrade water services through there. That actually will go all the way to Barker, but that is being funded separately through the Utilities Department. I had listed some crash data in the report, and Charlie, I got your email about that. This is all strictly just vehicular crashes. I don't have pedestrian or bike numbers put together yet. I can look that up and add to this, but for today, I did not have that information.
I was impressed not impressed in a good way. But impressed in a really kind of couldn't believe it way. There were 22 crashes in 1 year. with vehicles. That seems significant.
Yeah, a lot of side streets and obviously 23rd Street, a lot of heavy traffic, so cars queue up and sitting in left turn lanes trying to get on side streets and
Mhm.
a lot of rear end accidents. So much like with the, earlier when we brought up the Mass Street,
Mhm.
lane configuration and in years past with the 9th Street, adding center left turn lanes helps get cars out of the roadway while they're waiting so that people don't hit them.
This seemed to be much more significant, though, than either of those examples.
You would think with the amount of, the volume of cars that's on the
Yeah.
street.
Could part of the study be determining if, I'm just concerned adding a left turn lane could actually be a little bit dangerous, because you're going to encourage people to queue up, like at 5 o'clock, and, or if you have something there where somebody's wanted to turn in left to Tennessee and somebody wants to turn left into O'Reilly's.
So we looked at that a few years ago, probably
Mhm.
10, 12 years ago. It's part of the Traffic Safety Commission, and we actually put the no left turn
Right.
from 4 to 6 p.m. in place. I don't know whether that gets followed completely, but
I'd be kind of scared to get rid
I
of
mean,
that, actually.
I would expect, based on Zach's comments, that whether it's diverters that prevent that traffic, like at Schwartz, 6 at Schwartz, that gets reviewed at the time to see if, what you're saying makes sense.
Right.
But, yeah.
I'm just trying to want to make sure that the project scope is a real fresh look at that, not
But I
a kind
don't,
of assumed.
I don't think that adding a left turn lane is going to make it more unsafe or safer.
Is this, use it or lose it kind of deal?
Yes.
Yeah, this is a project that's in our 2018 budget. KDOT's set aside the $500,000 for this specific project, for this center turn lane. We're able to do other things, in conjunction with that center lane project, such as add a sidewalk on the north side of 23rd Street and complete that gap. Some other things with those funds. So, and we're tying on to the utilities water line project as well. But as far as moving forward with the project, as kind of the conceptual design with the center turn lane, it is use it or lose it, because that's what we agreed to do with our turn back agreement.
And 500,000 will cover, you think, all of the city's responsibility, other than the stormwater stuff?
That was our estimate. We have some additional monies from that agreement for mill and overlay. We're going to try to combine the projects together, to have some economies to do some more pavement restoration work along 23rd Street as well. So, from our preliminary estimate, we feel that the funds are sufficient
Okay.
as far as the budget.
Okay. How will I note the Douglas County Bikeway plan, it says yes. How would that affect what happens in this stretch?
It's a good question. On our bikeway plan, 23rd Street is designated for a shared use path from Iowa to Mass Street, I believe, or maybe even further to the east. We have not, through redevelopment projects, required a shared use path to be installed on one side or the other side of 23rd Street over the past 10 years, or however long the bike plan's been approved. Some of it's due to the numerous access points along 23rd Street. We don't, it's not necessarily good to have a shared use path if you have a lot of access points because of all the turning traffic. So we feel it would be probably more appropriate to consider planning for a path on 21st Street that would be have less traffic volume, probably be more appropriate for a bikeway. So I brought up that question in one of our staff meetings with our planning staff in regards to this project, and that was one of the thoughts for not doing a shared use path on this segment, that we would likely redesignate that with a bikeway plan update that we're doing next year through the MPO. And that would likely push the bikeway or the bike plan for the area to 21st Street, which would be more desirable for the bike network. So we are not planning to put a bike facility on this stretch of 23rd Street with this project. It would be sidewalks on both sides.
So with not doing bikes on 23rd, I mean, to me, it makes sense to open that up as a bikeway because you have a lot of businesses there. And I mean, you know, part of being a complete street is making businesses accessible to all, and it might bring traffic down if people could take a bike instead of a car. But I don't know.
How wide is the sidewalk?
I don't know the current width of the one on the south side.
I mean,
We
how
would,
wide will be 6 foot?
it would be 6 foot. If it's on the back of the curb, we add a foot, it'd be 7 foot. Need to get into the design. We're gonna need some right-of-way or easements, I believe, to get in the sidewalk on the north side. It's very tight. That's why a sidewalk hasn't been installed to date, so it would be very challenging to just get in the sidewalk. But by code, it's 6 feet, so that's what we would try to achieve.
Out of curiosity, what's the minimum distance between the sidewalk and the residence? Or should sidewalks have variance?
Between, what's the question?
Sidewalk and residence, an existing residence.
What, as far as the
I
building?
understand that. Yeah, when you lay out the new sidewalk, you know, go right, can you go right to somebody's window, do you have to stay 5 feet away?
We, on this project, we don't know what that distance is gonna be. We need to, I mean, it's a tight space. One of the challenges with these kind of infill reconstruction projects is all the things that are there. There's utility lines, I think on the north side, and so we need to work around some things, and there'll be landscaping affected and fences. And one of the things we're going to look at is narrowing the lanes. Right now they're 12-foot lanes, so we would look at taking those to 11 or maybe even 10 if we need to see what the best design is for this segment. So those are things that we would work out through the engineering and design phase of the project.
How long is the design expected to take?
What's that?
How long is design expected to take?
We would like to get that going on that here over the winter, and would plan to have construction occur next summer, 2018. So we would
Wow.
do the design here in the spring and construction in the summer. We'd like to hit that construction window when school traffic is less in the summer.
Was this discussed in the city commission? It must have been to get on their budget. Kind of, you know, I'm kind of out of sequence here in terms of what we do and how that affects the outcome, given it's already on the budget for 2018.
Well, we would, as far as it has been discussed, it's been in the budgets and the CIP plan. It's been discussed through the turnback agreement of all the different projects on 23rd Street. For tonight, we wanted to get some, feedback from you, if there was any, on the scope that we're presenting and the idea of adding the sidewalks, the center turn lane, looking at traffic calming if needed for side streets, because I know that's been a question on this project. Just that kind of general scope of the design, getting some approval on that before we start doing plans. So this is an attempt to get any preliminary discussion or questions or concerns before we even start design, so that we don't get halfway through and have some concerns come up and delay the project. So that's really all that we're looking for tonight is to approve the scope of the design, but all the details will still need to be worked out through the process.
To add to that, I would say, I had at least one or two phone calls, kind of asking, well, which side is when you say widening, where is that? And to his point, we're not at that stage yet. That'd be during the design stage, whether it's both sides of the street, there's a couple feet, or, more on one side than the other in certain locations. So if any members of the public had questions about that, we wouldn't have that information at this time. That would be after the design firm's selected and they're going through their motions. Then we would be able to say, okay, it's going to be so many feet to the north or so many feet to the south, but we don't have that information right now.
So in the RFQ, it states that there could be a minimum of one meeting to present to the city commission. Would that, I assume that's just kind of boilerplate language. Is your expectation that they would bring a design back to this group before it gets?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can add that.
So the
to
public will have an
RFQ.
opportunity to have a input on the design. as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would foresee us getting to about midway through design, and we bring the plan back here for approval before we go to the final design, which would be in the spring. And then at the city commission, it should be more of a consent type item.
I guess my only concern from years on the Traffic Safety Commission, putting left turns back so that you can hit these side streets going to the north. People are gonna look and see down Mass Street being a red light, and there's just a cut throughs going through there. I don't know if it's traffic calming or what. I mean, I don't think with the neighbors, you wanna wait until afterwards and be like, whoop, we got a problem now. I don't know how to incorporate that into the project, though. Because it's kind of one of those things, you don't know it until you have it, but, I mean, you can look at traffic counts and all that stuff, but you don't know what your cut-throughs are until they're.
That was true.
Yeah. I mean, that's my only concern, because we've talked about these streets before.
I would think that a conversation with the neighborhood early on to say, do you guys want traffic to be able to get into your neighborhoods from 23rd Street, or just cut it off completely to eliminate that cut through? And that would be early on able to make that decision, I think, and it's not gonna be sitting here unless it's after the fact.
Yeah.
So, which isn't the way to do it.
No, I mean, we need to avoid the after-the-fact thing, anything else but that.
So this would really only be in Tennessee, Ohio, right?
I'm sorry?
There's a diverter at Vermont Street. Right?
There's an existing diverter at Vermont right now on the north side, nothing on the south side.
And signage at Tennessee and Ohio, no left turns, right?
Yeah, the through streets would be Ohio and Tennessee on the north and Vermont on the south.
I mean, I'm concerned about that Ohio Street for an eastbound left turn there at the end of that island. You're gonna really back traffic up if you decide you wanna take a left turn there.
Yeah, we'll look at that. Right now, there's a raised median through there. I don't think as he's shown it, we've really anticipated extending it yet. We may discuss
Cut that off.
extending it, so you cut that off. I don't know, when we look at the design details, we'll look and see what different options there are there, but that's a possibility. But Tennessee would be one certainly that we want to look at, if it'd be appropriate to put in traffic control with the project. We had a similar situation on Iowa Street when we didn't have a center turn lane, and the before and after traffic volumes on the side streets were similar after we did the center turn lane. So there was a lot of concern about having that center turn lane. We put it in, went back, got traffic counts, and it did not increase the cut through traffic. Not that that couldn't happen here, but so we do want to think about that as we're looking at the design on the early on stages, but some of the answer may be wait and see and then go back and do it. So.
Any other questions? All right. Is there public comment on this item? Carol?
I was heartened to hear the range of questions on on this particular project. Let me see, where am I? Here. Now, this looks like a really strange comment, but if you really think about it, 23rd Street is one of the most important streets we have in the city. It's a solid property tax base. It's a solid sales tax base. Infill already exists, the kinds of things that we're trying to move towards as a city. We have infill there. Things are close together. And the reason I think this is important is because that's good for pedestrians. Pedestrians do not want to go out to big box stores. You go to one, that's it. You're not going to be walking to the next one. But if you go on 23rd Street, you can walk to lots of different locations. So it's prime for that kind of thing. Adequate parking already. Now that's a hard to come by in town or anywhere else. And it's ripe for redevelopment if we take care of it, which we're not doing it. We're neglecting it. This is a picture of 23rd Street. It's looking down on Louisiana Purchase right there. I did this mostly to show you how close the businesses are and how easy it is for pedestrians to get back and forth. The sidewalks on the south side are the narrowest. I think that's, what, 3 feet maybe, 30 inches? They're not wide. And right now, they're being shared with cyclists because it's too dangerous for cyclists on the street. Now, last time I brought this intersection, this is Louisiana and 23rd, which has the awful reputation of being one of the most dysfunctional intersections in the city. And there's a car going right by me while I'm taking these pictures. And it really just puts the pedestrian right out there. It's not a safe intersection, not safe at all. And here's, I just grabbed a picture of Google Earth. This is the whole stretch. There's Louisiana 23rd, there's Mass and 23rd, and everything in between. Here's Vermont Street. Now I live south here, and there's Checkers, there's O'Reilly's, there's a bunch of residents in here before Kentucky Court. I really don't poke around in the bushes, so I couldn't tell you how many. I think Rusty Springer's house is still there. So there are a couple of driveways. Back behind it are 200 residences. That's all. Pretty much we don't use Vermont Street anymore unless we want to get into a T collision. Because anytime someone tries to turn left into the neighborhood, we get broadsided. So we don't do it. We're pretty good at following the signs. Every once in a while, someone gets anxious, but pretty much we follow the sign that says no left turn between 4 and 6. Here's the other intersection, Mass and 23rd. This one I also brought last time, and there's a city bus right in front of me while I'm sitting here taking pictures. This intersection is also not very functional and is extremely hazardous for pedestrians. And I heard that you didn't have pedestrian counts yet, but there was a pedestrian crash there, a mother and 2 children I think it was last summer, I don't remember the details, but there are always pedestrian accidents at that intersection. I'm sorry, pedestrian crashes, it's a new terminology. So here's a picture looking south. These Breesedale monuments were recently replaced. In fact, I took this from the grant proposal that the city submitted to get the money for it. Here it is in 1912. These houses are over 100 years old and still there. And way down there where that streetcar, trolley, whatever is headed, is Haskell Indian Nations University, which first opened in 1884. 700 to 1,000 students each semester, a major source of pedestrians at that intersection. Yet we really don't plan on them. We don't plan on that source of pedestrian traffic. So what I wanted to do is suggest to you folks, and you already started doing it from what I'm hearing, is a plan for the street. It's not just that one section, it's a plan for the street. I do think that the left turn lane by itself would be a chicken lane. You have a few driveways to the south, and those folks would take their lives in their hands just to turn left if that's what they have to do. In my wildest dreams, I think, wouldn't it be nice to put a roundabout mid-block so that everyone could turn right? However, there's no real estate to do that. If you put in the left turn lane and nothing else, you're creating more of a hazard for pedestrians and cyclists. And I know cyclists are not supposed to be using that route, but you know, cyclists got to go where they got to go, just like pedestrians. It's going to be more hazardous, not less. Anytime a vehicle is turning, they're looking at traffic, they're not looking for pedestrians. And then here's kind of an interesting concept. It was a highway. It's not a highway now. We need a long-term plan that's going to revitalize that strip and make some nice urban infill something. This is being done in other areas. I was recently in LA, and Venice Boulevard, they're taking pre and post data to see how fast they're moving the traffic and at the same time accommodating other modes of transportation. There are other projects going on around the country where they're trying things as well. What you're doing does not fix pedestrian problems. It does not fix bicycle problems. The sidewalk to the north is nice. I know one of our goals is to complete gaps. However, as a point source for pedestrians, I can't see that there are going to be that many on the north side. Most of the pedestrians are going to be on the south side, or they're going to be coming from the high school. That's just my wild guess. So I encourage you to do some forward thinking, and keep in mind that once we do this, if we do it like the same old highway, that with a left turn lane, it's going to be worse for pedestrians. And some of you have already brought up the concern about left turns. That will also be a problem. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I tend to agree. I keep just in my mind that putting left turn lanes is making more of a convenience for drivers and no one else. And it's not really making it a complete street. It's just making it convenient for more drivers. And there's a lot of storefronts and a lot of restaurants there. A lot of places that people could walk to in the evenings. I mean, I live right near there, and so it doesn't make sense to me. If you're talking about the city of Lawrence becoming a nice area for people to be at, that 23rd is a major intersection and everyone should have the ability to use it. That's just my 2 cents.
Are there other people from the public that would like to comment on this item?
Gary Weber, 907 Merle Court. The sidewalk on the north side is really problematic. It's right on the street. There's absolutely no easement there. There's power poles. The one on the south side's bad enough, there's only 18 inches between it and the street. But the one on the right side, there's just no room for a sidewalk. David, is there any way we can get more easement over there?
I mean, that's one of those things we need to work through the design process and with adjacent property
Okay.
owners and see what the impacts are and you know, if it makes more sense to shift the roadway to the south versus on the north, if there's some challenges, those are things we need to work through.
Okay.
Just don't know at this stage.
I'm never gonna say, don't put in a sidewalk, but it sure would be nice if we could get a couple feet between that sidewalk and the street.
Yeah, we'll do the best we can.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah.
Any other comments from the public? All right. We'll start the commission discussion on this. Michelle, you were kicking us off, it sounded like.
Yeah, I expressed my opinion quite clearly.
I really like Carol's comment that this is no longer a highway, and I think it's hard to, it's honestly hard to think beyond that, because it's been that way, and I think,
See, and I haven't
The-
been here, well, I mean, I've only been in Lawrence for 12 years, so I haven't seen them before. My head isn't over there.
well, I think just the notion that the public is going to start acting differently on this road because it's no longer a highway, I'm not convinced that people are going to go there quickly. Just in conversations I've had about 23rd Street, that people don't see it as a place for bikes specifically. And that's because they see it as a state highway, and they don't think it's for everyone, so. So I think Carol's raising this question around, you know, what should this street be, not just this segment, and it sounds like you're
Of course, you have to
kind
look
of,
at- you have to look at that in context of the whole. If you do
Yeah.
something to reduce capacity on 23rd, you're going to push them on the 19th. Then you'll have to answer to Michael because you'll be pushing traffic.
that's a good point,
This is true.
yeah.
You have a good point. You don't, the idea is not to reduce capacity of the vehicles. What counts are probably north of 20,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that.
20,000 vehicles per day. While it's not designated a highway, it still serves probably more than most highways
Mhm.
as far as traffic. And so you've got to find out a way to balance pedestrians, bicyclists, and cars or vehicles. And, you know, there may not be a perfect solution. It may be that 21st Street is, you know, the place to put the bikes, and you do what you can for sidewalks. I don't necessarily have an answer, but I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and say I have the answer, and I think that's what the design professionals are for, is to kind of sort through those questions and come back with some solutions. I think what we need to do is say, hey, this is what we're concerned about. Let's throw that back to the design professionals and see what kind of solutions they can come up with.
Well, I've been out there looking at this, and I see people on bikes all the time. You know, I was out Sunday night making my rounds, and I saw two, people riding on the sidewalks. And so I think a big concern is there's not space for the bicyclists on 23rd Street. And they're relegated to the sidewalk, and the sidewalk has been installed in lots of parts of 23rd Street that wasn't there only a few years ago. But it's still not sufficient, and the countywide bike plan calls for this to be a shared use path. So I guess I'm concerned that we're not kind of acknowledging what already is happening, how people are using it. And I realize there's concern about how many access points there are. That seems like also could be part of the conversation about, should that be the way 23rd Street is designed? If the state no longer is dictating terms on this street, what is our long-term plan? Is it to continue to provide access, so much access, or is it to restrict that and to somehow reconfigure the street in a long-term way? So, I know we have to take it a little bit at a time, but it just seems like there isn't yet a picture of how this whole entire road should be reconfigured.
any segment along 23rd, this is a good place to play with because there are fewer access points in terms of businesses that are located here. It's more residential. There's more opportunity here to make room for bikes and pedestrians than there would be, further to the west. So it's a good opportunity to try to connect those neighborhoods to the more commercial section of 23rd Street.
Would there be a way, I think there's parts of 23rd Street, I'm thinking on the north side, where you could actually create a frontage, reduce the number of access points, and have essentially a frontage road go in and serve several businesses at one time. Well, I'm sure you, off the top of your head, it's going to be hard to answer that question, and I know on the south side it would be more difficult. It's what my memory serves me.
Yeah. KDOT did a study about 12 years ago, and they created an access management plan for 23rd Street from Iowa to Louisiana, that they looked at frontage roads. There are a couple kind of frontage roads there where Blockbuster used to be in that area, or the kind of more service cross-access points than frontage roads. But so we have, through that study, they created a plan. We've done implement some of these access management projects when a redevelopment has occurred to consolidate driveways. And we've done, I don't know, about a dozen projects through there over the last 10 years. That fund is going away, or we've exhausted all of the dollars. We're working with Dillon's right now on the south side to reduce their 2 driveways into 1. That's kind of the last project. That was also state money that we're using up. So there is some study that's been done. We will continue to look for opportunities as redevelopment occurs. It's very difficult for us to do a project up front and start taking away businesses' access points. So we've done it through, over time, through redevelopment with consolidation and making it a condition of approving site plans and redevelopment projects. So it's very difficult just to go through a whole corridor and change things overnight as far as access goes. So we have done a lot of it through this corridor. I think it's been successful. That's just a little bit of background. We don't have any other plans in our CIP to reconstruct this section of 23rd Street, and I'm thinking Iowa to the Irving Hill, to the Haskell Bridge. East of the Haskell Bridge, that project is in our CIP, and there's some KDOT turnback money for that stretch of road as well, from the bridge to the east city limits. And so that will be an opportunity to look at probably a more comprehensive reconstruction project with right-of-way and access and a median if need be, or other amenities or access improvements. So that's a little bit of history. Again, this project it's more of a minor geometric improvement project and not a full reconstruction streetscape type project. So we're a little challenged with the limited funds we have for this project and that with the scope. So and the right of way is very tight. So there's going to be some balancing that needs to be done on getting the sidewalks and green space and all the things that we want to get into the street. But
Well, personally, I think it's pretty hard to say no to $500,000. And I do respect the idea that the design is yet to be looked at. I think from my perspective, given Carol's information and Gary's comments, I'm going to think a lot more about what's going on between Iowa and Louisiana in terms of past, present, future, and maybe some kind of vision as to whether it should or should not be a bike atmosphere. And given that, it might influence how we look at Louisiana to Mass. Personally, I wouldn't get close to 23rd on a bicycle, but I have other means to get around, including my feet, and not everybody does, and a lot of people do ride bikes, and that's the only way they can get there. So I think, you know, really it needs to be looked at, and Charlie made this comment when we were talking about Massachusetts, around 13th, in that area around South Park. You know, let's look at it all the way to 23rd Street, and not just, you know, take this one section and call it a day. And I think as far as 23rd Street, it's a really complicated, for me, it's a very complicated deal. But I do think it needs to be, this section needs to be looked at in the perspective of the whole road. So, go ahead.
During the Bicycle and Pedestrian Issues Task Force, 21st Street was one of those things that came up, and we kind of discussed sort of, you might say, I guess, I always thought of it as through traffic, bike traffic, I should say, on 21st Street, right? Because, like you said, I mean, no one wants to bike on 23rd Street, but people on bikes are still wanting to get to those businesses, so it's how do you allow sort of a more comfortable road, like 21st Street sort of serves as through traffic, but you still have to have ways that people on bicycles can get to different locations on 23rd, because that might be where their destination is. And so, I mean, I don't think that maybe this falls in the scope of this project, but it does seem like whatever we can do, I don't know, to start addressing that is helpful. Although, I mean, like I said, I don't know if that's the scope of this project, and the center turn lanes do seem like they're very specific to cars, but that's, I think, other than access management. But I mean, I agree with this idea that we should look at 23rd Street, the whole thing, and what we want it to look at like. That was something, I had a class, never thought I'd be doing transportation, but I had a class where they had us look at 23rd Street and do an access management plan. Actually, they didn't have, I should say, they had us look at a street that was very much like 23rd Street, which they didn't say. Said, what would you do to this street? Then at the end of the class, they said, well, this is actually a town in wherever it was, and they showed us what they did. And it was just such a nice project, because you were able to see sort of the access management they did, and it made you go, yes, I would like this in my town. So I don't know if that's something that can be sort of addressed more or looked at more, like what it could look like. So otherwise, I think this with access management looks good.
Well, what you need from us tonight is just to move forward on the design. As I understand it?
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Maybe this is the address. Is the 500,000 contingent on there being a turn lane? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. There couldn't be another safety element.
That's what the money's for. I don't know. As far as a bike ped, I don't think there's any other, we can't spend the money to not do the center turn lane and put in a bike path somewhere with the money on one side or the other. It was for the center turn lane. It was to alleviate the crashes that we have out there, rear end crashes, injury crashes, and so that was, it came out of their highway safety money pool, and they had different pools of money that they put to this 23rd Street corridor, and it was out of that pool of money for safety improvements. That was primarily geared towards vehicles, and that's why it's the center turn lane.
I don't think there's a huge advantage to having a multi-use path on the other side of the road, just because of the driveway, the multiple driveways.
I'd like to just have consideration for if there were a shared use path on that, where it would be, and is this going to preclude that from ever happening in the future? I mean, I realize the bike plan could be, it's going to be modified next year. So it seems like one has to change, if this just physically can't be done, then I'd hope the MPO would change the bike plan. But if it's in the plan, then it seems like when this is being considered, they ought to consider in what way we'd have a shared use path on this section of road. So I don't know if that's within the scope or how you're...
Well, I guess I would recommend that we would add to the scope to look at the feasibility of putting a shared use path in this stretch and what the options are, what it would cost. I mean, it would ultimately require more right-of-way or easements, and this would be the cost and the impacts to do it. So it's another 4 feet. The sidewalks are 6 feet, so it's another 4 feet. Like I said, we got to look at the lane width. It's already challenging right now with the right-of-way with 4 12-foot lanes, let alone having 5 lanes. So we're going to narrow the lanes, add the sidewalk on the north, but we can look at an alternative cost or what we would recommend for putting a shared use path in this segment. I think it's really challenging between Iowa and Louisiana to find an additional 5 feet, because some of that sidewalk is 5 feet through there, and what side of the street you put it on, and it would be very difficult with all the parking lots and the utility poles. And could it be done? Yes, in the long-term future, but it's just not in our plan to redo that street and change it substantially.
That kind of raises the question of the overall vision and what this is going to be in the future, because if you just put a shared use path along one section that doesn't really connect to anything else, then it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for like a cyclist, because there's nowhere for you to go except just on this part. I mean, would it connect to something up north or south, or, I agree with you. I don't think it can go all the way to Iowa along 23rd Street, but I guess if they're going to think about it, they're going to have to think about where it goes from there to make sense. So again, that gets to what's already been said, that we need to think about more than just this section. We need to think about where it's going to fit in what we see in the future.
Yeah, unfortunately, the bikeway plan the revisions to it won't be done by the time we make a final decision on the design of this, but we can look at the pros and cons at the cost, and we'll bring that back to this group before we go to the final plans.
I mean, I just look at the map, and there's one segment that clearly there's not space for a shared use path, but there's a lot of other parts of this that on the north side seem like there's enough dirt there that you could, so I look at this one section here where Little Saigon Cafe, Hog Wild Pit Barbecue. I mean, looks like an access road, or maybe you're describing there's actually, everyone has their own driveway there, which seems to be a problem if that's a shared use path too, so.
I think, in thinking about shared use path and whether it's worth putting a shared use path in a particular place, I think this is most comparable to 6th Street, maybe? Which I actually think 23rd is is more conducive to wanting to be outside and walking and biking than 6th Street. I think it's narrower. Am I right? Is that narrower? 23rd, maybe I should say from Iowa to Louisiana.
On 6th?
Then narrower than most of 6th, say, sort of the area of 6th Street that has businesses similar to that on 23rd. So that would be like Iowa to Castle or something, or Iowa to Monterey Way, or would that be a wider street?
The street's pretty similar. It's
Okay.
5 lanes. There's more right-of-way and less driveways on 6th Street.
On 6th Street?
Once
So
you get
there are
west of
fewer
Iowa.
driveways. Okay.
I was comfortable with your suggestion, Dave, to move forward on this and consider all the concerns and questions that people had, including a shared use path and how that may relate to future improvements and how one would look at 23rd Street.
Someone can put that into a motion?
Yes.
All right. Motion's made by Commissioner Evans, seconded by Commissioner Hurt, to recommend approval of the project scope with consideration for the potential for a shared use path and concern for, kind of give me a short version of what you just said.
Yeah. Consideration for future development west of Louisiana on 23rd.
Of what, yeah, west of Louisiana on 23rd Street. Got that?
Got it.
Any discussion of the motion? All right, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Are there any abstentions? The motion passes. Okay. Next item is number 7, Surrey Drive. Request for no parking between 24th Terrace and 25th Terrace.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Nick Voss. I'm a project engineer with the City of Lawrence. In August of 2017, the Transportation Commission received a request to restrict parking on one side of Surrey Drive from 25th Terrace to 23rd Terrace. The requesting resident cited home delivery and emergency access concerns when vehicles are parked on both sides of the street. A site visit and aerial images were attached to show usage along the street. Surrey Drive is a local street with a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. It is not a safe route or a bus route. It's not on the Douglas County Bikeway Plan. It has sidewalk on one side of the street, and it is 23 foot wide. Restricting parking on one side of the street is common throughout the City of Lawrence. If the request is approved, it would be something that would be done by city staff, and it would be recommended to be on the side without sidewalk to increase visibility for pedestrians. The correspondence that I received included 5 emails opposing the project and the requester, and an additional email for the project. Staff's recommendation is to deny the request for parking on one side of the street. If you have any questions, I can take those.
Does sanitation have any problems getting through there with trash trucks or anything like that,
No.
to your knowledge?
And that was, and then my follow-up in that same vein, somebody mentioned something about emergency vehicles. Is there, I mean, did you observe any?
There's nothing, I guess, different with the width of the street for other streets. This is pretty typical of a residential street.
Looking at your picture, there's the one, is that a vehicle that's that one right there? I mean, is that truck parked or is it moving?
Those, both the trailer for the painting service and the truck are parked. I think that's a city sanitation crew. I'm not sure what they were doing, but
So the white truck
it's parked.
isn't that illegally parked?
They
It's
were
pointed the wrong direction.
they were working out of the back of the truck.
I'm just asking.
Nick, on, I think nearly every letter that opposed this, the way it was framed was that that they were opposed to no parking on the street. And it wasn't clear to me that the people were opposed to no parking on one side of the street. Only one said, I'd be okay with no parking on one side. So I was really curious, the communication that they received, did it say the request was for no parking at all, or was it clear that it was really just for one side that was being requested?
I had the same question, because there were a few that said one side would be fine, but
Yeah, so I was left wondering if
was
they,
the request was for just one side, correct?
The request, I believe it said that it preferred no parking, but that one side would be acceptable. I do not
okay.
remember what was in the letter that was sent to residents, if it
The
outlined
request
that.
for one side, should be parking on one side only.
I went out there myself just to check it out, and it was, on a weekend, figured everybody'd be parked, and it was in the evening, so I thought I'd see what it's like in the real world, and I didn't see there to be much of a problem there, honestly. The pictures kind of support that. Everything you've presented to us supports that there's not.
Yeah.
Am I missing something, or is that?
Yeah, and the aerial pictures, I'm not sure what time those are taken or if there's certain times that it's a problem. And yeah, I was on site just the one time, so I can't speak to.
Okay. Any other questions of Nick on this one? Okay. Are there public comments on this item? Okay. Commission discussion. Is there a motion on this item? Are you guys ready to go to?
I'll make a motion that we support the staff's recommendation.
I second.
Okay. Commissioner Hamby makes a motion and seconded by Ron May, Commissioner May, sorry, Ron. To accept the staff recommendation to deny the no parking request on Surrey Drive. Is there any discussion of the motion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? That motion passes.
In May of 2017, the Transportation Commission received a request for traffic calming on Cedarwood Avenue between 25th Street and 26th Street. The requester cited an increase in traffic, speeding, and reckless driving as reasons for the request. Cedarwood Avenue is a local street with a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. It is not on a safe route to school, bus route, or part of the Douglas County Bikeway Plan. The north half of this section has sidewalk on the west side, the south half, does not have sidewalk. And it's 26 foot in width, and it's a residential area. The Cedarwood Apartments are also, I believe it's assisted living along this section. Traffic counts, 85th percentile speed and cut-through data was obtained for Cedarwood Avenue in October of 2017. The 85th percentile is the speed that 85% of cars drive at that speed or below. For this roadway, it was 31 miles per hour. The 24-hour two-way traffic averaged at 198, and cut-through traffic was 12%. To meet the city's traffic calming for a local street, it should be 5 miles an hour. The 85th percentile should be 5 miles an hour greater than the speed limit. 24-hour traffic count of 1,000 or greater, and cut-through traffic higher than 50%. I've received one email in addition to the requester, had one phone call opposed. Is staff recommendation that the Transportation Commission deny the request for the installation of traffic calming in this area? I can take any questions.
I would just comment that those senior living is independent.
Oh,
No, just
okay. Thank you, Ms. Shaw.
Any crash history on this?
I do not have crash history. It's not something that I looked up because of the traffic counts.
Looking at the map, is there a sidewalk on either side of Cedarwood Avenue between 25th and 26th?
To the independent living up to 25th Street, there is sidewalk. The south half does not have sidewalk
On either side.
on either side, so it stops, I think, at this drive
Okay.
right there.
Any other questions? All right, thanks, Nick. Is there any public comment on this item? Is it just you back there, Gary?
Yeah, just Gary. He's the only one
back here. Let's see if I'm seeing right. Okay. Commission discussion.
It appears to me that most of the letters are talking about the increased traffic because of the senior living area. I don't know that there would be a lot of speed increase because the seniors are going back to their house. You know, there might be one or two that drive crazy, but I don't think because of the increase of the senior traffic that would necessarily mean an increase in speeding traffic, if that makes sense. And actually all of those are through tenants to homeowners, so they're low-income seniors, so probably a lot of them are taking like the Independence Inc. transport and the senior transport to get places. I don't think a lot of them have their own cars. Some of them do, but.
Are people walking in the street due to no sidewalks? Because that might make a big impact on why people would want traffic calming. I'm assuming we don't have any data on whether people are walking in the street, but I think that's an important factor.
All right, motion was made by Commissioner Ziegelmeier, seconded by Hamby, to accept the staff recommendation. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor of accepting the staff recommendation to deny the traffic calming request on Cedarwood Avenue, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Please note the abstention from Commissioner Payden. Next item on our agenda is number 9, the CDBG sidewalk gap application.
City of Lawrence has been making continuous efforts to complete the existing sidewalk gaps to improve the pedestrian network. Community development block funds is one way that we are able to do this. We are provided with grant money through the program to construct sidewalks in low to moderate income areas throughout the city. City staff is proposing to apply for $150,000 of community development block grant funding. The application is due December 1st. We're proposing that the application include all sidewalks along safe routes to school, collectors and arterials within the low to moderate income areas. And then during the January 2018 Transportation Commission meeting, staff would seek feedback on coming up with a list for sidewalk to be constructed from possible grant money. Typically, we have received about 100,000, and we've had a list of 10 to 15 sidewalk projects and have done as much as we could every year. So I'm anticipating that it's the same, but it's in the grant funders' hands. Do you have any questions?
Nick, are there neighborhoods that are also receiving CDBG funding that use their funding to do any sidewalk work? Or is this all?
I'm not sure, and I don't know if, Dave, you have an answer. I know North Lawrence has done some speed humps with the funding.
Funding that they receive, or is
Funding
it?
that they received.
So it's separate from
yes.
what Public Works might get
Yes.
for this? Okay.
Commissioner, I don't recall any sidewalk segments
Okay.
in the recent memory that a neighborhood's applied for.
Okay.
So, but they could make an application for one. I remember of an application before to replace some stairs and redo it with a ramp. And that was up over there off Edge Hill Road, also north of 17th Street. I don't think that was ever funded, but there was an application for that, I believe, 5 years ago or so. But I think where we're at with we're going to talk about this in the staff items, with our prioritization plan, it would be good to wait until we finish that to identify the segments. And this application is due December the 1st. So staff met, and we met with the staff members in development services that oversee the CDBG program, and they were comfortable with us using kind of our maps, our gap maps for bike and ped, and then going back and specifying the segments after we submit the application December 1st, but wanted to give everyone here kind of a heads up on the program and what we're going to ask for. And then once we kind of get through this policy on the prioritization scoring, we could kind of go back and then use that to prioritize the money for design.
And when do you find out about the grant?
Oh, it should be in the spring of next year. The deadline is December, and then they have meetings throughout the spring in a number of different areas of the CDBG home funds, and they discuss the applications, and then they make a recommendation on allocating to all the
I'm just thinking,
requests.
like January, is it necessary to come up with what we'd actually do in January, or is that just?
Well, we would like to be able to present the board that reviews the applications a list if we can get there. I don't know if they have a date yet when they're going to talk about capital projects. I think they have a night where they talk about capital only projects, and so if we're able to get our draft criteria on prioritization complete, and we could kind of develop a list and kind of go off that list. Sometimes we include more projects than we may have money for, just depending on going through design, and then we would cut back a few to use all the dollars. So that was our goal with the January. So that January, February, that's traditionally been when we kind of go and present the application or the projects.
So the deadline that you're faced with, December 1, is the internal deadline to get the proposal to the Community Development Advisory Committee? Is that-
Correct.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Okay, thanks, Nick. Any discussion on this, or I'm sorry, is there anybody from the public who would like to comment or have a question on this item? All right, commission discussion. All right, is there a motion?
Motion to approve the staff request. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Dillon. Who did the second? Seconded by Commissioner Schartz to approve the staff recommendation for the CDBG sidewalk gap funding request. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Are there any abstentions? Motion passes. All right, next item on the agenda is staff items.
Well, I would like to, I guess, officially introduce our new transportation engineer, Amanda Saheen. She's been here about a month now, but this is our first regular meeting, so she's going to give you an update on our prioritization project.
Nice to finally be here and meet you all. I've met a few of you previously, but not all of you. All right, just wanted to give you a quick update. I've been working with Jessica Mortinger on this prioritization. We've done some updates to it since I believe it was presented, kind of the first draft, and we're adding the ramp prioritization into it. We've done that. We went last week to Independence Inc. Access Review Board, kind of reviewed what we were looking at with them and got a lot of support from them. So we met with some internal staff also to review it, and we're making a few modifications right now. So we plan to have that ready, a draft ready for input from you guys by December meeting. So that's kind of the update is next month you guys should be able to see it. So that's about it.
Commission items. We have the couple subcommittee minutes for the Complete Streets Subcommittee. Are there any other items from commissioners? Okay. Our calendar, we have a study session this week on Thursday.
Please let us know if you cannot make it. I know we've heard from some, but not all. I'd like to make sure we have a quorum.
We did have to cancel last month's meeting. So staff did request, if we're not going to make it, to let them know so that they can make decisions about canceling. I did have a question about the calendar. Are we going to take the items from the October study session and move those to December?
Yeah, we need to find some space for those. I don't know if they'll make December. If not, they'll be the first of the year.
Okay. And then, not sure if this is a calendar, or maybe I should have brought it up in commission items, but I met with staff to talk about the possibility of doing a longer day-long training / retreat, and really took the example from the Planning Commission. They have an annual training orientation, which happens to be this month. It's on November 17th, and some of you may know Commissioner Payton is a member of the Planning Commission as well. So I'm gonna go there to watch and sort of learn from you guys what you're learning about and how staff is kind of training planning commissioners. And I thought that the same approach could be useful for us. I was thinking that January would be a good time for it. At that time, we'll actually shrink by 2 members. We'll have our temporary Bicycle Advisory Committee member and Traffic Safety Commission member will no longer be with us, so we'll be a little smaller, and I think it's a good time for us to maybe, spend some time together, getting clear on things that staff thinks we need to learn about that we haven't already gleaned over the course of this first year, but also spend some time in the afternoon perhaps talking about what our goals would be for the year. And making sure we don't bite off more than we can chew, you know, thinking about what's really important to advise the city commission on and help city staff with. So, you know, such as the sidewalk repair issue, which hasn't really been resolved yet. Maybe the Complete Streets Committee, I'm sure you have other ideas, but that would be a time for us to brainstorm on what we think are kind of our priorities and how we might organize to see those things happen. So I don't have a specific date in mind, but I was thinking maybe you guys could give us a few options and then we could see if we get enough availability for one of those. Will that work out?
Yeah, I'm planning on attending that planning commission
Training or orientation?
training, I think November 17th as well. And at our, I think it was December study session agenda, we had some time allocated to 2018 goals and priorities, so we could probably talk a little bit that meeting about topics that we want to focus on going into next year and looking for dates and schedules for those meetings, and then something that works out, what day it could work out, days that could work out for the group to meet to have a similar all-day retreat. So we'll keep that in mind for January to see if we could work something out. I think that's a good idea and a good transition point to do it as we get to the new year with the new 9 commissioners on board.
Okay.
Not new, but the final 9, reduced to 9 members.
Thank you for your time. Yes, sir. All right.
Dave, do you all have a facilitator or facilitators that you use for events like this? Or do we self-facilitate these kinds of things?
Yeah, I don't know how the planning commission does theirs, if they have, you know, what all their topics are and staff members that are involved. We don't have a designated city staff facilitator that I'm aware of. We've hired facilitators before to come in and help. Could be an option if it's needed. I think a lot of it could, you know, some of the planning commission all-day retreats, probably a lot of things that we kind of talked about when we started this with coma and some procedural things, but there's probably some topics too that they get into, but it's a good idea if it's needed.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're done.
Can I ask a
Yeah, you got
At
it.
the last Thursday meeting, there was discussion whether Thursday was still good for everybody. Did you follow up with that any further?
For the study sessions?
Yeah, because we had, for 2 weeks, 2 times we'd had trouble getting.
Yeah, I think Amanda sent out an email to everyone last week to get a head count, and I don't know if we've heard back from everyone. We're still planning on using Thursdays for this November meeting, obviously in December, and then going into next year, we should discuss if that time is still appropriate or works best for the majority of the group. It's probably challenging to find a good time for everyone to meet, but I think it is important that we find something that works for the majority of folks. So whether it's in the mornings or noons or in the evenings, staff is open to different ideas, but we're going to look at that next year as far as the Thursday meetings go.
All right, anything else? All right, take a motion to adjourn. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, Steve, I just kind of acknowledged that you had the minutes, but do you want to give a verbal update?
Could I, if I do it?
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm sorry I didn't get that.
Could we put up the chart real quick, Zach or Dave? I'm tired and grumpy too, so I'll go.
That's totally fine.
Yeah, you can just stop right there. I think that what we've really landed on here, and we emphasize each time we get together, is that rather than going directly for a policy, we want to talk about the process and what's unique to Lawrence. There's a bunch of policies out there, and we could probably read 10 of them and pick the best one and call it a day. But I think kind of being motivated by the analytics that I think Jessica was using has come up with for ped and bikes, the numbering system, I started thinking about how we could apply that to complete streets, with the idea that we would be thorough and that we would not necessarily jump to conclusions too quickly based on a numbering system. And you might ask why a colorblind architect would come up with a coloring system. The reason is Microsoft will let you mouse over the colors. It'll tell you what they are. But my idea here was to be comprehensive, to look at physical constraints and social considerations in looking at a complete street project. And I can tell by some of the comments that Michelle has made tonight that she's been under the influence of complete street thinking. And I think we've got miles to go with that. And what I'm hoping to do here is to create a system where we can look at rating things by color and stimulating a conversation as opposed to maybe jumping too quick to a conclusion. And this is very conceptual. The feedback I got from the committee was all, hey, this looks interesting enough to pursue it. And I think you could do this, basically at each level of the design and see how we're doing. But at the end of the day, I think we had, a list of ideas, thoughts, concerns relative to all the aspects of complete streets. And looking at Gary and Michael are always very good at bringing the social aspect of what we're looking at, whatever it may be. And I do want to, this needs to be expanded quite a bit, but the social side of this is real critical. The things that I've attended, the seminars in Davis and Minneapolis, really had a layer of social justice and considerations for just every aspect of looking at the things that we look at. And so I want to make sure that's on the table and we're at least asking ourselves the questions. So that's what I was looking at here. This is conceptual. The list could be consolidated. It could be expanded within primary categories. But at the end of the day, I think it should stimulate a discussion and a list of things that we can hand off to the city commission, because I really think that's what our job is, more about how we voted or what we approved or not, but what we talked about. And that's the idea behind this.
Can I make a comment, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
I looked at your document, it's really good. I'm encouraged that you're making some effort to move to the next step on complete streets policy. I went back and I read our walkability, our silver walkability award, to see what they had to say about this. And here's what they said, and I think you're right on line. They said that our efforts in planning were strong and they were impressed with our complete streets policy. But they'd like to appreciate more information in the application of that policy. And they specifically said, has Lawrence developed a project checklist? Now, I see what you started on as a project checklist. So I think that's a very good start on complete streets. But the next one was really where I think we need to get to. And they said, has the city specified the process for exceptions to the policy? This gets to the real crux of complete streets. It needs to become the default, and that the only time we don't do it is when there are enough reasons to make an exception to that policy that we're willing to forego it. We want to avoid the kind of castled thing where we had, here's a complete streets, and here's an equally impressive option called traditional streets. where it's a choice between two. We want it to be the default, and that the only way we go to the traditional street is when there are so many criteria that argue against it, against a complete streets, that we're willing to forego it. So I think for the committee's work, the next thing you might, if you come up with something you're happy with a checklist, the next thing you might start thinking about is what they call a process for exceptions to the policy, so that you have a set of exceptions that you can look at, the committee can look at and say, well, we're going to do the policy, but there are these criteria that allow us to make exceptions to that policy, so that it becomes the default rather than just a choice. I understand David's point about not becoming a hard-bound policy that can't be altered, that it's a guideline for the commission and for you, and I understand that. But I want us as a city to move toward the complete streets being the default, and that a traditional street option be the last option if we can't make any kind of a complete street work. Thank you.
Well, that's the intention here, everybody, is that it's looked at. The kit of parts is from A to Z, and it's in this list. And so when we get to something like Dave's example of a sidewalk on Iowa, east side of Iowa, where the topographic constraints really prohibit it, unless you build a very expensive retaining wall. We're exactly what you're trying to do. We want to identify those exceptions and why. You know, it's not done when you put a color on here. It's done when you say why or why not. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, the three of you, for continuing to work on this. Anything else? All right. So we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Did I already write this one down? Commissioner Dillon, seconded by Hamby. To move to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? We're adjourned.
Yeah.